Impulsive donor. What do you think that means? Yeah.
Respond to like emotional kind of stories and they'll just give that away.
Yeah. Typically it's a response, and it's an emotional response to some kind of a story or some kind of an event, or there is a stimulus which prompts them or impels them to give. One of the best examples of this is in our work is what? Is when there is a tragedy, either man-made or natural disaster, and Red Cross rallies or Salvation Army rallies, Doctors Without Borders rallies, and encourages people to give to support victims of a hurricane or victims of a fire or victims of a tsunami. Okay, so people, the impulse is to help others. And oftentimes that thinking is, wow, I'm glad I wasn't in the path of that tornado, and I'm glad I didn't lose my house. So I want to help those people who did. That's the impulsive giver. They're wonderful because they respond to those stimuli. The challenge in fundraising with dealing with impulsive donors is remove the stimulus, remove the response. So it's difficult to get impulsive donors to repeat their gifts in the absence of whatever compelled the first gift. So if it's all about disaster, we know we're going to have disasters. We'd rather not have them, but the truth is we're going to have them. But most of us probably work for nonprofit organizations where we don't deal with disasters or disaster relief. Okay, so the impulsive giver is hard to retain, and it's hard to keep that donor involved with us over time. All right? They're wonderful to have because they will step up when there is a reason for them to step up. But if we don't have a compelling reason, usually some kind of emotional stimulation, then they don't give, or they don't give in the absence of those. What is an habitual donor?
Annual, just sort of renew it up.
Yeah, they just give and they give again because they're in the habit of giving, right? So what do we know about habits? If you have a good habit, usually that's the one that's hard to keep going, isn't it? But if you're really unusual and you have a bad habit, what do you know about bad habits? They're just hard to break, aren't they? They're nearly impossible to break. Okay. Now what about an habitual donor? Well, this is a good news, bad news situation, right? They're in the habit of giving. That's a good thing. Because they give, as you said, that annually they give and they just give again, they give again. But what do they give? The same thing. They gave $25 last year and they give $25 this year, and they're going to give $25 a year for the next 50 years. Okay? So it's hard to get them out of the habit of giving the same amount of money. And the same amount of money doesn't do for us today what it did 5 years ago. Is that fair to say? Okay, so those $25 gifts repeated year after year after year don't help us to move ahead with what we want to do in our nonprofit organization. So it's good to have the habitual donor, but there are built-in challenges with the habitual donor. Okay? Why, as we go up the pyramid, does it get smaller? What was that? There are fewer of the donors in the top two bands. Okay, but if you put a fundraising terminology onto this, what you would have is basically the bottom two bands are the people who give to the annual fund. They give year in and year out to support programs and services, money in, money out. The careful and the thoughtful giver are the givers who give what we define as the major gift, the principal gift, and in particular for the subject matter this morning, they give the planned gift. Okay, the careful giver is the giver who asks pointed questions about your organization. They're going to hold you accountable. They want to know that you're transparent in what you do with contributed income and money that you raise for the organization. They want to hold you accountable that you're going to use the money the way you say you're going to use the money. They probably ask you questions about what are your costs of fundraising? And what are your administrative costs? What is overhead? They're probably going to ask questions like that. They're going to hold your feet to the fire. You're going to have to be answerable. Okay? We have few of those donors most of the time in our organizations, but they're the donors that usually drive our programs towards success. All right? And the very top of the pyramid, who's there? That's the planned gift donor. The planned gift donor is thoughtful, gives from the sense of stewardship. I've spent a lifetime accumulating this asset. If I give it to you as a nonprofit organization, I would expect that it's going to have long-term impact. I'm not going to expect that you're going to spend my bequest in your annual fund to close the gap in the budget. But I'm going to expect you to keep this asset in place for a long time. That's the thoughtful or careful donor, and that's the planned gift donor in most instances. Okay? So that's what we're talking about when we talk about planned giving. Okay, oh, this one is really faded. I'm sorry. Why planned giving? I'll go through these with you. You probably can't read what's in the gray, can you? Or maybe you can. Maybe it's just my old eyes. I don't know. Okay. But why planned giving? The rationale for the donor. Okay. That's why I asked you the question about Gene's presentation. Partly through a bequest in a will or other type of a planned gift, we can fulfill our ethical will. Because through the giving of financial means, we can in fact live out our own values, or we can perpetuate our values beyond our lifetime. Okay? It's a great way to leave a legacy. Planned gifts often provide great opportunities to name things, to name programs, or even in some instances to name buildings. Okay? Create impact. Usually, not all the time, but usually a donor's planned gift is the largest gift that she makes to a nonprofit organization. So you're going to have the biggest impact through a planned gift. Okay? And we have here engaged the family. We would encourage that if people are going to leave or going to establish planned gifts, that this all be discussed with the whole family so these things don't get challenged. And you don't end up with nasty lawsuits or arguments that try to get resolved through the media, and the name gets dragged through the mud, and the family name and the organization's name as well. So it's a way to engage the family. And what are the values that matter to us? So what do we want to perpetuate through our planned gift? And we can't overlook the last bullet point that's up here, that there are tax considerations that come into play in many, if not most, or even all planned gifts. What we have found in our work, for the most part, is the tax consideration does not motivate the gift. Something above these other 3 or 4 bullet points, that's what motivates the gift. The desire to make a difference, the desire to be charitable or philanthropic, that's the primary motivation. But often what we find once we start negotiating the deals of a planned gift is when the tax considerations are brought to the table, the gift often becomes larger because tax considerations and tax implications are such that the larger the gift, the greater the tax benefit. Okay? So from a donor's perspective, that's why we would do planned giving. What about the benefits to the donor? Benefits of making planned gifts. Okay? A little bit longer list here. Number 1, and this is why people make planned gifts the same way, the same reason that people make any kind of a charitable gift. There is a need to give. Okay? Gratifies that need for the enjoyment of giving. The founder of the fundraising school, a man by the name of Hank Rosso, has a very famous statement about fundraising. Actually, 2 statements about philanthropy and fundraising, which we have lived by ever since Hank moved the school to Indiana University. One of those is that fundraising is servant to philanthropy. Fundraising is servant to philanthropy. So if you take the fundraiser out of the equation, philanthropy would actually shrink. Fundraisers and fundraising play an important part in philanthropy because oftentimes it helps people to see what's possible. And it helps people come to a realization what they want to do and how they might be able to do it. So fundraising serves philanthropy. The other statement that Hank made that we like a lot is that, related to the enjoyment of giving, is Hank said that fundraising is the gentle art of teaching people the joy of giving. Teaching people the joy of giving. Okay, so if you're in fundraising, you are in that process of